So if I say to you, the sky is dead, your brain kind of immediately throws this literal error code. Right.
Right. Yeah, it's a total category mistake.
Exactly. I mean, the sky was never alive in the first place, so it can't technically die.
Compute fails.
Compute fails, right. But somehow you instantly know exactly what that oppressive, gray, hopeless sky looks and feels like. The literal meaning of self-destructs, and from those ashes, this completely new understanding of reality is born.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And today we are doing a deep dive into why your brain just did that, and, why that specific glitch might actually be the most powerful cognitive tool human beings possess.
It's so fascinating because we usually operate under this expectation of literal precision.
Right.
We treat language like binary code. You type in a command, the computer executes it.
Yeah.
The developer points to the screen and says, there it is. Pure information transfer. Clean, transparent, pointing directly to empirical facts.
But then you try to explain something truly complex, like a sudden shift in your career, or the heavy weight of grief, or even some bizarre quantum physics concept.
Right. And suddenly that literal language machine is completely broken.
Exactly. You hit a wall until you finally say, well, it's like, and then you use a metaphor, and suddenly the lights go on.
They really do.
So for this deep dive, we are looking into the nature of language, meaning, and truth. And we are centering this around one of the most honestly ambitious philosophical works of the 20th century.
Oh, absolutely.
We're unpacking Paul Ricoeur's 1975 masterwork, The Rule of Metaphor, the creation of meaning in language.
Yeah. And to do this, our sources include a really comprehensive critical review of his philosophy on figurative language. And that's paired with excerpts and an analytical breakdown of Ricoeur's actual book. Plus, there's this incredibly revealing appendix that maps out his own intellectual development over the decades.
Which is so crucial to understanding him.
It really is. Because Ricoeur's mission here was monumental. He wanted to rescue metaphor from what he called the positivist prejudice.
The positivist prejudice.
Right. It's this deeply held belief in modern thought that only literal, empirically verifiable language can convey truth.
Oh, I see.
And that metaphor is just, a pretty cosmetic decoration.
Right, like it's just poetry, just window dressing.
Exactly. But he argues something radical here. He says metaphor creates meaning. It actually gives us access to reality itself.
Which is wild. So if you've ever felt like a concept was impossible to grasp until you found that perfect comparison, this deep dive is going to explain the actual mechanics of that cognitive breakthrough.
Yeah.
But, before we get into the architecture of his argument, I think we need to understand the man who spent 400 pages defending figurative language.
We really do.
Because looking at the sources, he didn't just wake up in 1975 and decide to write about tropes.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah.
He took a pretty brutal, decades-long journey to get there.
Yeah.
The sources actually provide a chronological breakdown of this intellectual development, which is super helpful.
Right.
And it starts way back in the 1940s and 50s in a field called existential phenomenology.
Existential phenomenology? That sounds heavy.
It is, yeah. Thinkers like Husserl, Karl Jaspers, and Gabriel Marcel really heavily influenced him early on.
Okay.
So in this first phase, Ricoeur was completely obsessed with the philosophy of the human will.
The human will.
Right. He was looking at human finitude, boundary situations, purpose, and motive. And he attempted to describe human existence using very direct, reflective, ordinary language.
Which, reading that, it sounds like trying to write a technical user manual for human consciousness.
Yeah, is a great way to put it.
Like, step 1, intend to pick up glass. Step 2, grasp glass.
Right. And that direct approach, it actually works perfectly for simple voluntary actions.
Okay, sure.
But Ricoeur hit a massive wall when he tried to describe the darker, sort of thornier sides of human experience.
Oh, like what?
Well, try writing a literal objective description of profound guilt, or self-sabotage, or the concept of evil.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you can't just say, I have 40 grams of guilt today.
Exactly.
The literal vocabulary just doesn't exist for the abstract weight of that kind of experience.
It really doesn't. So he realized that to understand these profound human experiences, he had to take what he called a hermeneutic detour.
A hermeneutic detour.
Yeah. And hermeneutics, just for background, is the study of interpretation.
Right.
He saw that humanity has always relied on symbols and myths, like the myth of the fall, or symbols of a stain, or carrying a heavy burden, to talk about things like guilt.
Because direct language failed him.
Exactly. Direct language failed, so he had to turn to indirect symbolic language.
But, if you start digging into the hidden meanings of symbols and human guilt in the mid-20th century, you are inevitably going to collide headfirst with Sigmund Freud.
Oh, you absolutely are.
Yeah.
Which brought Ricoeur to this massive crisis point. And it actually resulted in his famous book, The Conflict of Interpretations. Because he realized that interpreting a symbol isn't just straightforward. There are two completely opposing ways to do it.
Two ways. What are they?
Well, the sources outline, first, a reductive hermeneutic. Ricoeur calls this the hermeneutics of suspicion.
The hermeneutics of suspicion.
Right. This is your Freud, your Marx, your Nietzsche.
Ah, okay.
They look at a symbol, and they try to explain it away by reducing it to its base components.
Right, like tearing it down.
Exactly. They'll say, oh, your religious symbol is just a projection of unconscious libidinal drives.
Or, it's just an expression of class struggle masking economic anxiety.
Yes. They treat the symbol like a symptom of a disease that you need to cure.
Wow, okay.
But Ricoeur contrasts this with a recollective approach.
Recollective.
Yeah. Instead of tearing the symbol down, this approach tries to recover the original constructive meaning.
Okay, so building it back up.
Right. It asks, what is this symbol actively trying to reveal about our existence? And he realized that true self-knowledge requires wrestling with both. You need the suspicion and the recollection.
Man, so he's deep in the weeds of psychoanalysis and symbols.
Very deep.
And then, according to the sources, the entire French philosophical scene just shifts under his feet.
It was an earthquake, honestly.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, structuralism became the dominant intellectual force.
Structuralism.
Right. And structuralism treats language as a closed, unconscious system of signs.
Okay.
It's incredibly objectivist. It dictates that the meaning of a word is entirely determined by its difference from other words in a dictionary system.
Wait, so it completely dethrones the human subject?
Totally dethrones them.
Yeah.
The speaker's intention doesn't matter at all. Only the underlying structural grid matters.
The analogy building in my head for this whole intellectual journey is, it's like someone trying to upgrade a computer operating system.
Oh, I like that.
Right, because he started out trying to map the user interface. That's the human will, the existential phenomenology phase.
Yeah.
But when that failed to explain the system crashes like the guilt and the evil, he started looking at the hidden code. That's the psychoanalysis phase. But then structuralism comes along and it's like someone telling him, hey, the code is just a closed loop that runs itself and the user doesn't even matter at all.
That framing perfectly sets up how he finally broke out of that closed loop.
Okay.
Because he realized that looking at isolated symbols or treating language as this giant static dictionary, it completely misses the point of how humans actually communicate.
Because we don't just speak in dictionary definitions.
Exactly. So he moved to studying full written texts and discourse.
Right.
He argued that language isn't just a closed system of signs, it's an event.
An event?
Yeah, it's someone saying something about something to someone.
Oh, wow. And that brings us to metaphor. Because metaphor is where language actively creates entirely new meaning.
Yes.
It's not just retrieving a pre-existing file from that structuralist hard drive. It's writing new code that changes the operating system itself.
That realization right there makes metaphor the ultimate battleground for his philosophy.
Man.
And all of this culminates in a 1971 seminar at the University of Toronto, which eventually birthed the rule of metaphor.
Okay, so this is the origin of the book.
Right. And his ambition wasn't just to write a neat theory of poetry.
No.
He aimed to synthesize the entire history of Western thought on how figurative language works.
Which is huge.
It's massive. And he structures his argument by starting small and progressively zooming out.
The progressive movement.
Exactly. The book is structured as 8 studies. He goes from the isolated word up to the sentence and finally to full discourse and how it shapes reality.
And the core thesis running through this entire progression, from what I gather in the sources, is that metaphor is a strategy of discourse that unleashes the power of fiction to redescribe reality.
Yes, redescribe reality.
I really want to keep that phrase, redescribe reality, front and center as we go. So if we follow his structure and start at the absolute ground floor, at the level of the isolated word, we have to talk about Aristotle.
We do. Aristotle is kind of the source of a foundational ambiguity here.
Yeah.
He defined metaphor as epiphora.
Epiphera.
Right, which translates to transference or displacement.
Displacement. Oh,
It involves taking a noun
right.
and giving it an alien name. So you transfer a meaning from a genus to a species, or you do it by analogy.
But the sources point out this really incredible paradox here.
Oh, it's brilliant.
The very word Aristotle uses to define metaphor, epiphora, which means a spatial physical movement from one location to another, that is itself a metaphor.
Yes.
He's literally using a physical displacement to describe a linguistic shift.
There is literally no non-metaphorical way to define metaphor.
That is so wild.
It is, and Aristotle actually saw this as a stroke of genius.
He did.
Yeah, he wrote in the Poetics that crafting a good metaphor implies an intuitive perception of the similarity in dissimilars.
The similarity in dissimilars.
Right. It requires a cognitive leap that you can't just teach someone. You either have it or you don't.
Let me challenge that trajectory, though.
Okay.
Because if Aristotle viewed this as this brilliant cognitive leap, how did the later tradition of classical rhetoric end up treating metaphor like, a cheap parlor trick?
That is the big question.
Because the sources talk about the decline of rhetoric. How did we lose that initial respect?
Ricoeur diagnoses this as a historical tragedy, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. He looks closely at figures like the 19th-century French rhetorician Pierre Fontanier.
Okay, Pierre Fontanier.
So originally, rhetoric was a massive, robust discipline.
Right.
It included inventio, which is how you build a logical argument, elocutio, which is the style, and compositio, putting it all together for public debate.
So it was very comprehensive.
Very. It was deeply tied to philosophy. But over centuries, rhetoric just suffered from diminishing returns.
Oh.
It got divorced from actual argumentation.
So it kind of shrank.
It shrank until it was just tropology.
Tropology. Just classifying and categorizing figures of speech into this giant taxonomy of deviation.
Exactly. It just became a list of fancy ways to speak improperly.
Wow.
And this devolved state of rhetoric led to what Ricoeur calls the substitution theory.
The substitution theory. Explain that one.
So the idea is that every word has a proper literal meaning.
Okay.
And a metaphor is just a deviation where you substitute a figurative word in place of the proper literal word.
Okay, so under substitution theory, a metaphor is just putting like a fancy Instagram filter on a photo.
I love that, yes.
Because it doesn't change the underlying pixel data of the picture, right? It just makes it look more dramatic or moody.
Exactly.
And if you take the filter off, the exact same information is still there.
And that positivist prejudice is exactly what Ricoeur is trying to destroy.
Right.
Because if a metaphor is just a substitution, then it provides zero new information.
I
So
see.
you can just paraphrase it back into literal terms, and the cognitive value is completely identical.
Right. It teaches us nothing new about the world. It just decorates it.
But Ricoeur is arguing that metaphor isn't the filter on the photo. Metaphor is the lens itself.
The lens itself, it fundamentally changes what you can actually see and capture.
Exactly. But to prove that it's a lens, he has to widen his scope.
Okay.
Because if you only analyze language at the level of the isolated word, well, substitution theory seems correct. You just swap word A for word B.
Right. It makes sense at that level.
So Ricoeur breaks out of that dead end by moving up the ladder to the level of the sentence.
The sentence. And this is where he brings in those Anglo-American analytic philosophers, right?
Yes.
People like I.A. Richards, Max Black, and Monroe Beardsley.
Right.
And they introduce what they call tension theory.
Tension theory. Because semantics deals with the sentence as the basic unit of meaning, whereas semiotics just dealt with isolated signs or words.
Okay.
These philosophers argue that a metaphor isn't swapping one word for another. The magic happens through the friction between words in a sentence.
The friction.
Yeah. Richards called this the tension between the tenor and the vehicle.
Tenor and vehicle.
Right. And Max Black called it the focus and the frame.
Let's use Max Black's famous example to ground this for the listeners.
Sure.
The example is the chairman plowed through the discussion.
Okay, break that down.
So the word plowed is the focus. It's the word being used metaphorically.
Right.
And the rest of the sentence, the chairman, through the discussion, that's the frame, which is being used literally.
Exactly. And the meaning of this metaphor doesn't exist in the word plowed isolated in a dictionary.
No, not at all.
The new meaning is created by the clash, that tension between the literal frame of a corporate boardroom and the focus of heavy, physical, agricultural labor.
Oh, that's not a good way to describe it. The sources refer to this as an impertinent predication.
Yes.
Or calculated error. Like you are purposely breaking the rules of literal sense to force the brain to synthesize a new connection.
which connects directly to the philosopher Gilbert Ryle's concept of a category mistake.
A category mistake.
Right, which you demonstrated so brilliantly with your "the sky is dead" example earlier.
Because literal logic just says error.
Exactly.
Only living biological organisms can experience death. The sky is an atmospheric phenomenon. So, error. But the brain doesn't just stop at the error.
No, it doesn't. Metaphor destroys that old logical order only to invent a new one.
Wow.
The literal meaning self-destructs, and from the ashes of that absurdity, a new semantic pertinence is born.
A new semantic pertinence.
You create a meaning that did not previously exist in the language.
Right.
You aren't just substituting a literal word, because there is no single literal word that perfectly encapsulates the brutal, relentless, dirt-turning administrative force of a chairman plowing through an agenda.
That is so true. There really isn't a single word for that. And I see how this completely wrecks the French structuralists' approach, too.
Oh, dismantles it.
Because the sources mention Ricoeur critiques the Liège group and their new rhetoric. He critiques them for being trapped in semiotic monism.
Right, semiotic monism.
Meaning they were still obsessing over the isolated word, trying to scientifically map out these deviations from a normal degree zero language.
Exactly. They were looking at the dictionary, not the discourse.
Right.
Ricoeur synthesizes their work by saying, look, the statement produces the new meaning, but the word remains the focus where that new meaning is concentrated.
Oh, okay.
It's the focal point of the semantic explosion.
The focal point of the semantic explosion. I love that. Okay, so we've established the mechanics. A metaphorical sentence creates new meaning through friction. It's an event.
Yes.
But here is where I need you to walk me through the next massive leap. Because we're moving to discourse, which involves hermeneutics.
Right, the third level.
If a sentence creates new meaning through a calculated fiction, how does that relate to reality?
That is a big jump.
Because if it's a built-in error, how can it actually be true?
This is the pivot from semantics, which is how a sentence makes internal sense, to hermeneutics, which is how it refers to the outside world.
Okay, sense versus reference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Ricoeur bridges this gap by completely rehabilitating the concept of resemblance.
Resemblance.
Yeah. Classical rhetoric said metaphor is just based on a pre-existing resemblance.
Yeah.
You know, A is like B, so you swap them.
Right. They treated resemblance like a static fact that you just point your finger at.
Exactly.
Right.
But Ricoeur argues resemblance is dynamic. It is an active achievement.
An active achievement.
Resemblance isn't the ground you build a metaphor on. It's the result of the metaphor crashing the concepts together.
Oh, wow.
He pulls heavily from Kant and Wittgenstein here, specifically Wittgenstein's concept of seeing as.
Oh, like the famous optical illusion where you can see it as a duck or you can see it as a rabbit?
Yes. And it's not about projecting a mental picture in your head.
Okay.
It's a cognitive power to bridge semantic space. Imagination is the ability to construct new logical frontiers.
So you actively forge it.
Yes. You see the chairman as a plowman. You actively forge that resemblance in real time.
Okay, I follow that. But this brings us to the climax of the book, which the sources call split reference.
Ah, yes. Split reference.
And I'm honestly struggling to see how this doesn't just devolve into nonsense.
It's tricky.
Because the positivists argue that language is either verifiable cognitive facts or it's just emotive feelings.
Right.
And Ricoeur says poetry suspends literal reference. It stops describing literal objects entirely. If it creates a vacuum where it's not describing reality, how does that help us understand reality?
It's a brilliant subversion, actually.
Okay.
By suspending the first order, literal reference, by creating that vacuum, or epiche as they call it the metaphor, unleashes a second-order reference.
A second-order reference.
Yes. It doesn't describe empirical objects in the world. It discloses a world itself.
Discloses a world.
It projects a horizon of existence, a way of being in the world.
Okay, to make this concrete for me, the sources show how Ricoeur links this to Max Black's philosophy of science.
He does.
Specifically the use of scientific models.
Right. Think about how a physicist uses a heuristic model. Like saying an atom is a solar system. Right. The scientist knows the atom is not literally a tiny sun with planet electrons orbiting it.
Right, obviously not.
But they use that fiction to break down old paradigms and redescribe a reality they can't even see with the naked eye. Ricoeur argues metaphor does the exact same thing for human experience.
It's like a flight simulator?
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, a flight simulator is technically a fiction, right? It's not a real plane.
Right.
If you crash it into a virtual mountain, you don't actually die. It completely suspends literal reality.
Exactly.
But the physics it models, the aerodynamics, the instrument feedback, it's all so incredibly accurate that this fictional space trains you how to fly in actual reality.
That is a perfect analogy.
So metaphor is basically an emotional and cognitive flight simulator.
Yes. The flight simulator redescribes the reality of flight by temporarily suspending the deadly consequences of literal flight.
Right.
And poetry uses fiction to redescribe human reality in the exact same way. And this leads us to Ricoeur's concept of metaphorical truth.
Because if it's a simulator, the question is it generating a true or false output?
Right. And metaphorical truth is a tensional truth.
Tensional.
It exists in the paradox of is and is not.
Is and is not.
So when you say Achilles is a lion,
Okay.
literal truth screams, no, he's not a lion, he is a biological human.
Compute fails.
Exactly. The metaphor fully contains and relies on that literal is not.
Okay.
But through the cognitive leap of forged resemblance, it also asserts that he is like a lion in his ferocity and spirit.
Right.
Therefore, in this poetic second-order reality, he is a lion. The truth is found right there in the tension.
So we aren't just analyzing poetry anymore. We're making claims about the actual nature of reality itself.
We really are.
Which brings us to the final hurdle in his progressive movement, philosophy.
Yes.
But wait, you just dropped the word ontology in the prep notes earlier.
Oh, right.
How do we define that in this context before we move forward?
Sure. Ontology is simply the philosophical study of being, of what actually exists, and the nature of reality.
Okay, the study of being.
Right. So if poetry gives us this tensional, metaphorical truth, Ricoeur has to answer a big question.
What's that?
What is the job of philosophy? Does philosophy have its own grasp on reality, or is it just poetry in disguise?
Oh, wow. And the sources outline a massive intellectual brawl here between Ricoeur and Jacques Derrida.
Oh, it is a heavyweight fight.
Yeah, specifically focusing on Derrida's essay, White Mythology.
Yes. It's a fundamental clash. Derrida claimed that the entire history of Western philosophy is built on dead metaphors.
Dead metaphors.
Right. For example, the word understanding literally means standing under something.
Oh, I never thought of that.
Right. Or the word theory comes from a Greek word for spectator.
Okay.
Derrida argues that our most abstract, objective concepts are just worn-out metaphors that forgot they were metaphors.
So Derrida is basically arguing that philosophy is a scam.
Basically, yeah.
That metaphysics is secretly ruled by linguistic tricks, like using metaphors of light to represent truth or foundations to represent reality.
Exactly. He says the philosopher is just a poet who forgot they were writing poetry.
Wow. But Ricoeur fiercely pushes back against this.
He really does. He argues Derrida is actually relying on the old dead substitution theory of classical rhetoric.
With the Instagram filter.
Exactly. Ricoeur says a dead metaphor isn't a secret metaphysical lie. It's just lexicalized polysemy.
Lexicalized polysemy. Let's unpack that for the listener. Polysemy is when a word has multiple meanings, right?
Right. It just means a word has gained a new secondary dictionary definition over time because of heavy usage.
Okay.
It has lost its tension. So when you say the leg of a chair, you aren't feeling the semantic friction between human anatomy and wooden furniture anymore.
Right. It's just a dead metaphor. It's a standard dictionary definition now.
Exactly. So Ricoeur is saying that reanimating these dead metaphors doesn't unmask some grand philosophical conspiracy to hide the truth.
It just creates a new meaning event.
Yes. Philosophy's job isn't to police dead metaphors.
Right.
Ricoeur argues philosophy's purpose is to respond to the semantic spark of poetry by thinking more.
Thinking more.
Poetry gives us the heuristic fiction, the intuitive leap. Philosophy takes that leap and constructs rigorous concepts out of it.
Oh, I see. It builds the actual airplane after poetry runs the flight simulator?
That is beautiful.
Yes.
Philosophy provides conceptual determination.
Okay.
And Ricoeur concludes with a very tentative ontology.
Tentative.
Yeah. He suggests that poetry helps us signify things in act.
Things in act.
It helps us see reality not as a collection of dead, static objects, but as a dynamic, blossoming, active power.
Wow.
Though he admits this is more of a project for the future than a finished, airtight doctrine.
Right. So we've gone from Aristotle's noun displacement up to the semantic tension of the sentence, out to the poetic redescription of reality, all the way to philosophy conceptualizing existence.
What's the journey?
It really is. So How did the critics react to this massive synthesis in 1975? What did he get right? And where does the structure crack?
Well, the strengths are universally recognized.
Okay.
The sheer breathtaking synthesis of it all is unmatched. I mean, he managed to sit Aristotle, French structuralists, German hermeneutics, and Anglo-American logicians all at the same table.
Which never happens.
Never. These are schools of thought that historically ignore or actively despise each other.
Right.
But he showed how they all hold a piece of the puzzle. It remained a masterclass in cross-disciplinary dialogue.
That's incredible. But the sources do highlight a few major tensions. Where does his argument struggle?
One major critique focuses on symmetry.
Symmetry?
Right. The leap from semantics, how a sentence makes internal sense to hermeneutics, how it refers to outside reality, isn't perfectly symmetrical.
How so?
Ricoeur says the literal reference has to be destroyed for the poetic reference to appear.
Right, the flight simulator.
But in language, reference depends on sense, while sense doesn't depend on reference.
Explain that.
You can understand a sentence perfectly well without knowing what real-world object it refers to.
Oh, okay. I get it.
So critics argue it's a leap of faith for Ricoeur to claim the structure of metaphorical reference perfectly mirrors metaphorical sense.
Ah, I see. And what about that heavyweight fight with Derrida? Did Ricoeur definitively win the debate on dead metaphors?
That's pretty ambiguous, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. Critics point out that Ricoeur admits dead metaphors can sometimes be revived or reanimated in new contexts.
Okay.
But if they can be revived, doesn't that concede that Derrida is at least a little bit right?
Oh, true.
If they aren't entirely dead, they do still carry some hidden metaphysical baggage that shapes how we think.
That's a really good point. But despite those critiques, the impact of this book was basically seismic.
Oh, absolutely seismic. It effectively destroyed the substitution theory of rhetoric.
No more Instagram filters.
Exactly. It proved that metaphor is not just an ornament.
Right.
But more importantly, it defended the cognitive value of poetry against strict positivism.
Wow.
It proved that art and literature actually teach us vital truths about the world that empirical science simply cannot reach.
Which is so powerful. And that brings us to why a listener today, like someone prepping for a meeting or analyzing data or just trying to navigate modern life, why should they care about a 1975 French philosophy book on metaphor?
It is so relevant. We live in an age of severe information overload and strict literalism.
Oh, absolutely.
We are bombarded with data, metrics, and binary thinking.
We're constantly told to just look at the facts.
Right, look at the data. But Ricoeur teaches us that we shouldn't fear figurative language.
Right.
Metaphors are not distractions from the facts. They are essential cognitive tools.
Essential tools?
Think about it. When you are stuck on a complex problem at work or trying to understand a massive shift in your industry, literal data often completely fails you.
It does. It just gives you the what, not the why.
Exactly. You need the ability to spot patterns, to create those category mistakes that break old ways of thinking.
Right.
You need metaphors to redescribe a complex system so you can actually understand it.
Metaphor is how we innovate. It's how we force our brains to see the similarities in dissimilars, like Aristotle said.
It is the absolute engine of critical thinking.
So to leave our listeners with one final provocative thought to mull over, I want to go back to something the sources cited from Nelson Goodman.
Yeah, Nelson Goodman, yes.
Ricoeur uses Goodman's idea to describe the birth of a new metaphor. And Goodman says that a metaphor is an affair between a predicate with a past and an object that yields while protesting.
Yields while protesting. It's a bigamous metaphorical marriage.
Exactly. The old literal meaning protests the new connection, but the new reality yields to the friction.
That's so profound.
So here is the thought for you to explore on your own. Look at the major transitions in your own life or in your field of work.
Right.
What old labels or literal categories are currently protesting being applied to your new reality?
Oh, wow.
Because you might be forcing a literal fit that just doesn't work anymore.
It's just throwing an error code.
Exactly. So instead of forcing it, what unexpected metaphorical marriage could you invent today? What two distant ideas could you smash together to completely redescribe and unlock your understanding of your world?
Find your flight simulator.
Find your flight simulator. Because once you find that perfect metaphor, the literal meaning self-destructs, lights go on, and you're finally flying.